Hello, and welcome back to Bnei Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this insight and inspiration with friends and family. So you look at the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 23. And to note that this comes immediately after the revelation of Mount Sinai, the receiving of the Ten Commandments. In other words, this is the first order of business, or perhaps even an introduction to the first order of business post Mount Sinai. What does God tell us? Do not ascend my altar by steps, for you may expose your nakedness on it. What does this mean? And besides, if they couldn't make a stairway, how did they ascend the altar? Now, please note that the altar was about 2 or 3 stories high, 2 or 3 stories tall. So you needed some means of either stairway or, as they did, a ramp in order to ascend it, to bring up all the offerings, all the sacrifices to the top of the altar. What's really the big deal? And what is God telling us? Remember, we are all little sanctuaries. The sanctuary, the big holy temple, is a reflection of us, of each individual. That is that one model from which we have to all learn how to behave, how to go about our service and connection to God. Just like the altar, where one offered to God, one sacrificed, so too in the person, in our person, I would say this equates to the heart. The heart is where we offer our emotions, our passion, our feelings to God. This is where we sacrifice. Sometimes it's a difficult sacrifice. We want to do something, we have an urge or a certain temptation, and we suppress it. That's done in the heart. Perhaps it's governed by the mind, but it's done in the heart. The real footwork comes from the heart. So that's our altar. And what God is telling us, don't go up on stairs. Now let's examine this. What does this mean? Literally, we understand that the priests, they wore a tunic, which is like a long robe for a shirt, and it went all the way down to their ankles. So if they were to go on stairs, every time you lift up your foot to ascend the next stair, the next step, well, you will lift up your foot, you lift up your robe, you lift up your garment, that exposes part of your covered body. Okay, that's literally. But what is the figurative? What is the psychological? What is the spiritual message here? You see, many people have this mistaken notion that there are steps, that there are levels, that some are higher, some are lower, that some are more important, some are less important, some are greater and some are less great. Perhaps in that way of thinking, some people are insignificant altogether. They don't play any role. And that's a big mistake. That's a grave mistake. And that's what God is telling us. Before I give you the rest of the story, before I give you the rules, before I tell you all the details and we go over to the implementation of the Ten Commandments and all their details, I want you to know, don't ascend my altar by steps. Don't start judging and thinking who's greater, who's lower, who's in a higher step, who's in a lower step. Yes, indeed, there are people who are smarter. There are people who are more trained. There are people who have greater experience. There are people who have greater devotion because they've just worked on it. But at the end of the day, God wants us to know everybody is significant. Just because you may think that you're on the lowest step doesn't mean that you're not vital for this process. It doesn't mean that you're not important to God. In fact, when you think about it, when you ascend a ramp, even somebody who's on the top of the ramp has reached the very top, and the person who is in the very lowest point of the ramp just put their feet on the ramp, just entered, so to speak, just got onto this platform. One is higher, one is lower, but they're on the same platform. They're on the same surface. And that's the message of God. Each and every one of you, each and every one of us are vital, are important. To God, there's no smaller, there's no bigger. Yes, he's handed out different tasks. Certainly, there's a Moses, there's the patriarchs, there's the matriarchs. Yes, and we need to respect that. But in terms of importance, in terms of effectiveness, in terms of greatness in God's eyes, how vital we are for his mission, each and every one of us is on the same platform. And that's the message of these words. Never forget it.